So, welcome everybody. This is the 37th discussion of our Read, Write, Inspire Classics Book Club. So, today we are discussing Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. And so, we have a lot to discuss about. So, let's get started. I'll share the screen. I hope you can see it. Okay, let's begin. So, we'll see a little bit about the author today and about this book and a little bit about another book which kind of pushed him in the global map, I guess. And also we'll have a look about his influences, recognition, a lawsuit which he had to encounter. And I also want to discuss a little more in depth about why the book is very famous and what Rushdie has done with language, which has been something new and unique for his time. And also we'll discuss a little bit about the structure, style, and the themes of the book and quotes, of course. So Rushdie was born in Mumbai in 19th June 1947. And he grew up in Bombay and was educated at the cathedral. And he went to the John Connon School in Fort in South Bombay before he went on to study at Rugby School in Rugby at England in 1964. He also attended King's College, Cambridge, where he graduated with the Bachelor of Arts degree in history. Initially, he was working with the advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather. So he's famous for his writings, and his work often combines magic realism with historical fiction, and it primarily deals with the connections, disruptions, and migrations between the Eastern and Western civilizations. And usually all his books are set on the Indian subcontinent. So, of course, so before we see more about Midnight's Children, I just thought it's important to touch a little bit about the controversy which pushed him on the map, I would say, in fact. Though it's not really true that he wasn't unknown or something before the Satanic Verses. Of course, he was very popular and very famous even before the book. But this is one thing which pushed him out of India, which banned him from entering Pakistan, and yes, and all the other issues which came with it. So, Satanic Verses was published in 1988, and immediately the book was banned in many places, including India. Fatwa was called for, the death of Rushdie, and there were a lot of book burnings which happened, protest marches which were carried out, and as I mentioned, the bounty was placed on Rushdie's life. And even in 1999 and over the years also, the bounty has in fact been progressively been increasing. In fact, in 1999, it was about $2.8 million was the bounty on his life, and so on. And finally, as we know, in 2022, a man stabbed Rushdie after rushing onto stage, where he was actually scheduled to deliver a lecture in New York. And the lecture was about how America is proving to be a place which is uh, a safe haven for writers who are targeted elsewhere. And so some little more things about this, the whole controversy that this book started on was that basically in US, once the book was released, FBI was notified of about 78 threats which were made to bookstores. And there were also, I think there were two large bookstores in Charing Cross Road in London were bombed because they carried the book. And there was another London department store which was bombed. And in fact, the year when Rushdie was given a knighthood, bombs were planted in central London. And but however, they were found before they caused damage. Unexploded devices were also found in Penguin stores in Guildford, Nottingham, Peterborough, etc. And in US, immediately, most of the bookstores were scared to even carry the book, and even those which carried actually kept it under the counter. When Iran placed, the Iranian Foundation placed the bounty on Rushdie and issued the fatwa, Rushdie did apologize. However, it did not help. And in 2022, he was, gravely wounded and hospitalized after the stabbing. And the government of Iran, in fact, cites that it says that it had no foreknowledge of the stabbing and has no part in it. However, the Iranian state-controlled media has actually celebrated the stabbing. And in fact, in 14th August 2022, 2 days after the stabbing, the government-run newspaper of Iran called the attack an implementation of divine decree. I came across this little poem by Harrison, an English poet, which he also published a poem in The Observer and titled it as The Satanic Verses. And the poem goes something like this. I shall not cease from mental strife, nor shall my pen sleep in my hand, till Rushdie has a right to life and books aren't burned or banned. And so, yes, he had a lot of support from the writing community. But at the same time, another interesting part of it was that, in fact, many people from other religions, many leaders from other religions in UK and in US started questioning about whether the blasphemy laws of their countries should be expanded to include other religions like Islam too, which, at that moment they weren't. So there were a lot of discussions on what is right and what was wrong. Now, so this was another, important part of, and this, in fact, after Satanic Verses, Rushdie's life was very quite difficult. In fact, his wife remembers that they changed houses 57 times in some few months, I think it was 2 years period or something. Every 3 days, they would literally, 3 days to 1 week, they would be shifting homes. And after all this, but despite all those difficulties, Rushdie kept writing. And Midnight's Children, in fact, is his second novel. The first one was a science fiction novel called Grimace. And Midnight's Children won the Booker Prize in 1981. And it is considered as the Booker of Bookers. That is the best novel of all the winners. And it won it on 2 occasions, in the 25th anniversary of the prize and also on the 40th anniversary of the prize. In fact, Midnight's Children has sold over 1 million copies in the UK alone. And in 2003, the novel appeared at number 100 on the BBC's Big Read poll. And it was determined as UK's best loved novels of all time. So Midnight's Children has been called a watershed in the post-independence development of the Indian English novel, to the extent that the decade after its 1981 publication has been called as post-Rushdie. During that decade, many novels inspired by Midnight's Children were written by both established and young Indian writers. So this is a quote by V.S. Pritchett, where he says, in Salman Rushdie, the author of Midnight's Children, India has produced a glittering novelist, one with startling imaginative and intellectual resources, a master of perpetual storytelling. Like Garcia Marquez in 100 Years of Solitude, he weaves a whole people's capacity for carrying its inherited myths and new ones that it goes on generating into a kind of magic carpet. The human swarms in every man and woman as they make their bid for life and vanish into the passion or hallucination that hangs about them like the smell of India itself. Yet, at the same time, there are strange Western echoes of the irony of Sterne in Tristram Shandy, that early non-linear writer, in Rushdie's readiness to tease by breaking off or digressing as the gravest moments. This is very odd in an Indian novel. The book is really about the mystery of being born and the puzzle of who one is. Okay, a little bit about the lawsuit. So, as you know, Rushdie has been quite, critical about the emergency and about Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi. However, surprisingly, he had been fearing that a defamation suit might be brought in by her, or she would ban the book or something. Instead, in fact, in 1984, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi brought an action against the book in the British courts, claiming to have been defamed by a single sentence in the penultimate paragraph of chapter 28, in which her son Sanjay Gandhi was said to have had a hold over his mother by his accusing her of contributing to his father Firoz Gandhi's death through her neglect. The case was settled out of court when Salman Rushdie agreed to remove the offending sentence. So Rushdie was in fact very happy. He was like, okay, I've been let off quite easily, and I would only been asked to remove this single sentence, which he was more than happy to do so and just let go of it. Okay, so now something interesting was, a little bit of a discussion about what makes Midnight's Children great. And for that, I wanted to talk a bit about the history of Indian writing in English, especially considering that, I'm going to be reading out from an article on this about an excerpt from a book on this. And what's most interesting about this particular article is that it speaks about most of the authors and books which we've already read in the book club. So that made me very happy, and I really wanted to share it with you all. So I'm just reading out from this particular, article. So Indian English novelists have had two kinds of predecessors. So the first set of novelists were those who began writing in the pre-1930s. So they were those who wrote English with stiff correctness, always conscious that it was a foreign language. Their works and their English were imitative of the British novelists of the times. Sir Walter Scott and W. W. Reynolds were very popular with them as models. Then there came the novelists who rose in the 1930s, novelists such as Mulk Raj Anand, R.K. Narayan, and Raja Rao. They made a conscious decision to write in English as if it were an Indian language. Perhaps they did not regard it as foreign language since it had been domiciled in India for over 100 years. However, where they were different from their predecessors was in their objective of remaking British English very much like American and Irish writers like James Baldwin had already done before them. So they used, they used an Indian and not a foreign language. The self-assurance that they were using an Indian and not a foreign language gave them the confidence to bend the language to their will. Perhaps the use by these writers was their way of asserting their right to write in English by giving it a new and distinct identity. And the first major novelist to experiment with English for writing fiction was Mulk Raj Anand with his novel Untouchable, which we've already read in the book club. So what Anand did with the diction, dialogue, and syntax of the English spoken by his characters was a huge experimentation of those times. So while he did not alter the English he used for his remarks as a narrator, in the dialogues uttered by his Punjabi characters, he literally translated from Hindi and Punjabi words and idioms, even at the cost of disrupting the grammatical conventions of British English. For example, in Untouchable, he uses expressions and phrases like eating the air, which literally means to take a stroll, breaking the vessel, which means to expose a secret, or black in the pulse, no? Dal mein kuch kala hai. So something fishy, which are very common in Hindi or Punjabi, but which when rendered in English appeared odd and unusual. So you wonder, whether he really succeeds in such a usage. And yes, he does succeed, because He's able to capture the speech of the Punjabi peasants, and that's quite a success for him. Next, the other writers who did this, apart from Mulk Rajanand, was Raja Rao and R.K. Narayan too. And I'm trying to read only some excerpts from the book so that I don't end up reading an entire book to you. So these writers were very eager, not to write novels which were imitations. They felt inspired to show their countrymen and to the rest of the world. And they felt they had to write important literature in its own way. They were also aware of the close connection between the language they were using and the cultural baggage that went with it. So each writer sought to redefine English and make it Indian enough so that it could be used to communicate the Indian cultural and social values to English-speaking writers worldwide. The most important statement among these writers on the attempt to Indianize English for writing the Indian novel has come from Raja Rao in his foreword to Kantapura, which was published in 1938. Again, Kantapura is something which we've read in our book club. He had written, "The telling has not been easy. One has to convey in a language that is not one's own the spirit that is one's own. English is the language of our intellectual makeup, but not of our emotional makeup." Okay. So yeah, the magnitude of Rao's achievement in changing the filter of English to accommodate the emotions, culture, the values, and belief systems of his characters and their society is understood only if we compare, two statements. So this is something the author of the article has tried to do. So in the first statement, he says, if it's he's tried to rewrite a passage from Kantapura. In a proper English manner. And he says, Kenchama is a great Indian goddess who, according to ancient lore, is reported to have killed the demon that was preying upon the people of Kantapura. So the people worship her until today. So this would have been the proper English if it had to be written in and, in the right manner of English grammar. So how then comes the passage of how Raja Rao does this in Kantapura. Kenchamma is our goddess. Great and beauteous is she. She killed a demon ages ago, a demon that had come to ask for our young sons as food and our young women as wives. So I think that those two passages itself show the difference in, how writing had changed in the 1930s itself. Now, the second challenge was that English is not the language you encounter on the streets. Your milkman or maid servant won't speak English, nor will your rickshawala or your grandparents. The difficulty that Rao and Anand were experiencing were very real. How are they to write in English about people who do not normally speak English? The problem was accentuated when the novelist had to write dialogues or report the conversation among Indian characters belonging to different classes or castes of society. Again, R.K. Narayan also does it in his own way. He tries to convey Tamilian society and characters in English in an almost unobstructive way. He embeds Tamilian proverbs in translation and creates them so skillfully that you may hardly notice his experiments with English. Now, all this has in some way contributed to Rushdie's remaking of English in Midnight's Children. So Rushdie is the most articulate and important Indian English writer after Raja Rao to have spoken about the aesthetics of his use at a very, at length. So in 1984, in Rushdie's lecture, describing reality as a political act, Rushdie describes his views on English in a way that recalls Rao's views, though Rushdie has arrived at it independently. He stated that one of the changes has to do with attitudes towards the use of English. the appropriateness of this language to Indian themes. And I hope all of us share the view that we cannot use it simply the way British did, that it needs remaking for our purpose. So Rushdie spoke of the English used by the British as the English written with a capital E, and of the different Englishes, in a small letter E, that are now being used in different parts of the world where once the British had ruled. So he wrote that with the small letter E. So these small letter E Englishes were remakings of the English inherited in the former colonial countries and societies by writers who aimed to use them for the purpose of writing about their own people and struggles in the aftermath of colonization. He describes this as the phenomenon of the empire hitting back with a vengeance and says he finds these Englishes to be more vibrant than English. He observes that the formerly colonized had refashioned English in a way that had decolonized the English language they had inherited from the British. Okay. Now, Rushdie entering the scene of the Indian English novel with Midnight's Children, which is a book not about one region. Now, when it came to, Rao or Narayan or Mulk Raj Anand, it was usually Kannada, Tamil, Punjabi. They had one particular geographical, cultural area that they focused on. So Rushdie, when he came into it, it was not one region. It was the entire subcontinent. He uses English as a pan-Indian language and not as a regional language. And he does this by using Hinglish, Hindi plus English. And, so Rushdie, unlike the novelists who preceded him, uses the hybrid pan-Indian Hinglish to communicate the worldview and emotions of his characters. It is very effective because it is easily recognizable as the speaking voice of the common man or woman in India. So this was not so in the novels of Narayan, Rao, and Anand. In their novels, you had to consciously suspend your belief that the Tongawala or the sweeper were speaking in English. But that wasn't so with Midnight's Children. So, for example, if you see the passage, so Padma attempts to cajole me from my desk. Eat now, food is spoiling. I remained stubbornly hunched on paper. Padma snorts. Wrist smacks across forehead. Okay, starve. Who cares 2 pice? So first thing you observe is that Rushdie uses British English for the educated male narrator Salim and Hinglish for Padma. So that gives us the knowledge that these characters belong to different social classes. While the British English highlights the stubborn, moody character of Salim, as Padma tries to cajole him and persuade him to eat, like how an Indian wife is likely to do, her snorts and wrist smacks across forehead reveal his and her frustration and his inflexibility. So also, he says, eat na, that na. And again, she says, okay, starve, who cares 2 pice? That in English, when you want to emphasize on a particular word, you do not say the word twice to just emphasize on it. So that's a very Indian way of writing English. Again, for example, there's this, मैं गाते गाते काम किया. So when Rushdie writes he says, I sang while I worked. And that's, I think, one of the absolutely wonderful, ways in which Rushdie uses the English language. So interestingly, in all of his novels, and especially in Midnight's Children, he uses the Indian English and not the British English to represent the speech of his Indian characters. Okay. And if there is a difference between him and his forerunners, the one main thing difference was that his forerunners uh, took a lot of pain to make sure that they did not use even a single vernacular word, phrase, or idiom uh, in its raw form, untranslated into English. They never did that. However, Rushdie often refuses to make such concessions for the Western reader. Although he occasionally uses a Hindi or Urdu word in the original, the meaning of these unfamiliar Indianisms has to be derived largely from the context. He does not do anything to make the work easy for the Western reader, And at the same time, for an Indian reader, they would immediately recognize that usage. They never had a problem to decipher the significance of that. So this method of embedding the English language with select Indianisms is a clear advancement in the Indian writer's attempt to use English as a decolonized form of English. So in this particular way, Rushdie could be considered as a pioneer in Indian English fiction. Again, an example, this is when, there's this discussion between Aziz Adam and Tai, the boatman, where Aziz asks Tai for his age. So this is how the passage goes. No, tell Taiji how old you are truly. And now a brandy bottle materializes from nowhere. Cheap liquor from the folds of the great warm chuga coat. Then a shudder, a belch. How old? You ask how old? You little wethead, you nosy. So old Naku. So he doesn't really go along to say what is Naku, or he doesn't say what is chuga coat. And, even the sentence, no tell Taiji, how old truly? So there's no, no subject, no complement, or no predicate. And, but for us, we're not going to find it even a little bit weird. For us, it's quite okay and very easy to read. But for Rushdie, we don't, unless and until we consciously think about it, we do not understand the magic that he's been doing here with the language. Again, another interesting part of Rushdie's use of English is how he uses the dots and dashes in Midnight's Children. So he says in an interview, I found I had to punctuate Midnight's Children in a very peculiar way. I had to use dashes too much. Keep exclaiming, putting in 3 dots, sometimes 3 dots followed by semicolons, followed by 3 dashes. That sort of thing just seemed to help to dislocate the English and let other things into it. And he claims that he learned this from G.V. Desani in his novel All About Hatter. So if you reflect on this carefully, you will observe that what all the Indian English novelists have really been doing with British English. They too have been dislocating it, breaking up its existing linguistic cultural patterns, introducing new cultural patterns into it, and localizing it for creative use. And it all started with, in a major way with Rushdie. So, before I go on to the next part of it, let me stop the screen share and allow you to share your thoughts about the book. I hope it wasn't too dense.
No, that was required.
Yeah.
I felt that was required. This is an area that I was not aware of. Particularly the language, I was getting confused. As you just said, I opened that PDF also here. You asked how old, you little wet head, you just told you read it, you know it. And so old in the pool. Nakol. I was getting confused. What is this word? Why he has used it? Where from he brought this what you call language or whatever vocabulary? I told you before discussion. So this was required. Particularly when you are touching 3 authors, that is Anand, Raja Rao and our Narayan. But I was just thinking of Pushpam Singh. Where you placed him of all this? he also happens to be an Indian writer writing in English. Where is his position here? That I was one question that was in my mind just reading. I found he was also using some Punjabi words in the books that
Mm,
he has written.
mm,
Where we place him, that is one doubt. And I was not aware of this G.D. Dastani, whoever just prepared. I kept a note of it. I had to
mm.
find out what are the books that he has written and other things.
Yeah. So even I had come across him only through this article.
Okay, okay. And as Chandran sir has just said, well, we have to take care of our Tarur also, Shashi Tarur. He
Yes.
also writes a brilliant, very
Yeah.
confirmatory language as far as
Correct.
he
Correct.
doesn't digress other things, whether it
Correct.
is a word or a grammar or a context, almost British-like. That's what
True.
there is not much of an Indianness in what he writes. That's what I feel.
Mm. True. And Shashi Tharoor, and I think I had somewhere I read about Tharoor's.
Now, we read a book about him, no, madam,
Yeah,
writings
yeah,
of
no,
him
no,
in
that we read. I meant in
the
the
Indian novel.
articles, the all the hundreds of pages which I had here also. I had
Acha.
something about Tharoor and Rushdie.
Yeah.
I It's become actually a lot of material in on my table
I know,
today.
I know. This book is like that, actually, path-breaking, challenging.
Yeah,
That is what I felt.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, sir, if you recall, in
Ah,
Shashi Tharoor's novel, there used to be a
ah,
Malayali person who comes and talks to Gandhiji.
Mm.
And
yes,
from
yes.
the dialogue itself, you can make out that it is a Mallu speaking Indian
That
English.
is correct. That is correct. That is correct. Sir.
Mm.
That is correct. But he uses little now, sir. Unlike our Shashi Tharoor, Malayalam words I don't recollect. Speaking okay.
So I
He is
found
more of a
that piece actually about Tharoor, in fact. So
ah,
whether one believes that Rushdie labeled a generation and liberated a literature with Shashi Tharoor, or dismisses the novel as one great big confused bluff, Rushdie's influence on the novels that followed cannot be wished away. Not only has the novel been used to benchmark others, younger writers appear to find it difficult to step out of the Rushdie mode. It is difficult to think of novels that do not carry the unmistakable Rushdie Sam. From the great Indian novel to the God of all small things, the Midnight's Children factor is never absent. One notices the same irreverent play with words and conventions, the retreat into the bizarre, and the uncanny epic sweep, the historical ambitions, the blend of private and public that Rushdie began. Many of these novelists are too talented to blindly ape their distinguished compatriot, but few have been able to resist the Rushdie magic and attempt at times unsuccessfully to replicate it. But of course, I would Tharoor was definitely not unsuccessful. Tharoor's novel was great.
ah,
But
Great
yeah,
Indian
so
novel.
but that
Great.
influence is there, I think.
There are other writers also, Arundhati Rai, Jhumpa Lahiri.
Hmm.
Do they not come under the label Indian author?
They do. So he does talk about God of small things also, right? So
Ah,
that stamp of, they say the stamp of Rushdie is there in all of that to some
okay.
extent.
Acha. This is another information. Okay. I never looked at it from that point of view. Their book. As a matter of fact, this is the first book of Rushdie I read. Anyways,
Hmm.
we have to look through that prism also. It's Arundhati Rai. Okay, fine.
I feel it was there even in the lives of others, which we read in the book club.
Ah,
To some
ah,
extent, that individual life and the things which are happening in a country flowing parallelly
okay.
to some extent, I think, you know, with the Naxalite movement and everything.
That is good.
Yeah.
And in a way, we read another book you have recommended, that Neil Mukherjee. There was
Ah,
also
Lives of Others. Yeah, Neil
Lives
Mukherjee.
of Others.
Yeah.
That's what I. It's also
Hmm.
that independent struggle and other things.
Correct, correct.
Okay, you
Yeah.
brought it nicely about this. particularly technique of writing.
Correct. So,
Ashna, I'd like
yes,
to add a
yes,
little bit.
please. Yes, Bharatwaj.
I've taken down a few points. I don't know how I'm going to. Okay, anyway, first of all, you'd read an article where you said pan-Indian English. English is definitely not pan-Indian. I'm sorry to say that.
Okay. Trust you to bring
So,
it out.
yeah, I had to.
Yeah. Or I
And yeah,
maybe, yeah, true.
so and then I'd like to talk about satanic verses as well. But before that, you'd mentioned about the irreverence, right?
Mm.
That is the soul of novel. The soul of novel is wit. It's and irreverence. So, like he had taken the liberties with the English language. You'd mentioned James Baldwin, right? But Rashi's favorite author, James Joyce, had done it too. So he
Hmm.
was an Irishman, I suppose. Huh? So he wanted to give it a flavor, give the English an Irish flavor,
Hmm.
and even that was giving it back to the empire.
Correct, correct.
And
Definitely.
every language does that, breaking the grammar. Every language does that. Even Rushdie himself talks about it. Like he mentions Kundera. Of course, I had to bring in Kundera. And he said only English has done that. No, it's not just English. Even the French, which is very formal and everything, and the French writers who came from the colonies, the Creole writers, they had brought in the flavor that cannot, for the life of any Frenchman, could have been replicated.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay.
Good.
And
Hmm.
I didn't know about that, but it was all Kundera.
Okay.
And there's
That's
one more thing. Yeah. And coming back to satanic verses. So I was introduced to Rushdie by Kundera. Okay. So he talks about a lot of novels in one of his non-fiction books, and he admired the courage, not courage. You don't need courage to write something like uh, satanic verses because it was not anticipated. Okay. The effect it had, the controversy it created was not anticipated. Even recently in his interviews that few interviews that Rushdie did, he mentions that he never wanted to blaspheme or never wanted to create a controversy. If he'd wanted to do that, he wouldn't have spent 5 years writing a novel, a mad novel like Satanic Verses. It's not an easy novel to read, or you can't even contemplate someone coming up with that.
Hmm.
And what Kundera said was like, and one more thing, a novel is essentially an European art. It started in Europe. So novel, the word comes from the founder, I don't know, of the art form, novalis, right? So in everybody, what happened after the book released, there were so many controversies and nobody actually came to support Rushdie, saying, no, this is what a novel is about. They said, we, of course, he's heard the sentiments of religious people, but he has the right to do that. Nobody said, no, he's not heard the religious sentiments. So he said, in failing to back up Rushdie, uh, Europe has lost its essence. It has not defended its art.
Correct.
And there was only one person. I think it was Benazir Bhutto, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge controversy, huge rallies and book burning, effigy burning in Pakistan. She said, "Come on, the book hasn't even been released yet in Pakistan. You guys are just simply creating a controversy out of nothing." And
Exactly.
Kundera says, I remember this line very well. He says, the novel, the controversy in every country, the controversy preceded the book. Even before the book was translated into the language, the
Correct.
controversy, so it has lost its artistic quality. It is not,
Hmm.
it has never been judged on the basis of its artistic quality.
I think I'm just to take it one step further, Bharatwaj, from whatever
Mhm.
I have not read the book, from
Yeah.
whatever my knowledge about what the book is about, is
Mhm.
it just talks about some three different passages in the Quran, Yeah, right?
And
And
the name also, it's not just satanic verses, the satanic verses. It's very
correct.
specific, right?
Yeah. So it only talks about those three passages, which again has been mentioned in the Quran itself, that those were passages which were narrated by the Satan. Later on,
By the devil, yeah.
by the devil.
Yes, of
So
course.
that is why the thing comes that the satanic verses. So
Mhm.
those
And the
three
thing was,
verses
like,
were,
the person who
yeah,
stabbed Rushdie, he hadn't read satanic verses,
exactly. So
ironically or not.
yeah, everyone. I think
Yeah.
everyone, whoever issued the fatwa, or whoever
Mhm.
had an, I don't think anyone for that matter actually read the book before, actually uh, bringing the controversy about. I don't think the book had anything. I don't know. Maybe it could have been critical about some aspects of the language. I'm not aspects of the religion. It could have been, but I'm not very sure about it because I haven't read it. But as far as what Rushdie was trying
But
to say was a very different thing.
yeah, but like you said, it's irreverence, that it's the irreverence that they couldn't take.
Uh, but was it
So when
really
you
irreverent is something I don't know. It's something I really wonder. Was it really irreverent?
whenever you
That
take something that's considered sacred and bring it out of
it's
uh
sacredness. Correct.
yeah,
Hmm.
profanity.
Yeah.
When you
I think when they said the satanic verses, they assumed it to mean everything, not
mm,
what Rushdie was trying to say, is what I think. Again, he apologized and all, which didn't really work.
yeah, he ought not to have.
Yeah, it's sad.
Maybe one of those days we can pick that
Yeah.
book as
Ah, that it has to be a secret presentation then.
yeah.
Correct. Um, you wanted to
There's something
share
about the
anything else?
language as well.
Yes,
Language
please,
as well,
please.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do
So
share.
it seems fresh and it's something we're not used to, right? So he says uh, he's usually there's a torrent of what he can express with a sentence he expresses in several pages. Okay. So he has that caliber to bring it off, to pull it off, and he does it so splendidly. But after a point, what happened was, like, last year I finished Victory City, his last novel. And then
Hmm.
immediately within the span of like a day or two, I picked up the Moor's Last Side. I just couldn't go on because the style felt quite tedious. And
Hmm.
yeah, the central conceit is pretty similar in all his novels, I suppose.
Yeah. I felt that too. So after Midnight's Children, I think I picked up Shame, which
Mm.
I kind of liked. I liked
Yeah,
Shame.
Shame was good. Yes, yes.
Shame was good. I'm forgetting which one was the next one. I think I picked up East West, I think.
Okay.
I didn't complete it.
I picked up I mean, not the, I picked up Shalimar the Clown.
How was that?
You mentioned Ravi before. Ravi liked it, but I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I
I
couldn't
think
finish it either.
uh, Ravi has probably read all. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I know he's read Shame, but
Yeah, Shame was good.
yeah, Shalimar the Crown also. Right. Okay, you didn't finish Shalimar, but
No, 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 I couldn't.
okay. I heard a lot of good about Victory City. How was it?
Uh, it was okay.
Okay.
It was okay.
Knife. Have you picked up Knife?
No, no, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay. Yeah.
that one.
Okay, so I had a little bit to share about the themes which are explored in the book. So let me share my screen again.
I have just a small
Yes,
question here
yes,
because you have covered
please.
3 or 4 books from your
Yes,
side,
yes,
and
Shamaraj.
Bharadwaj is also for 3, 4 books. Can I take it that everywhere he goes in for this magic realism? Number one. Number two, is this technique similar in all these 3, 4 books which you just referred to?
Yeah,
Are they similar?
Bharadwaj can
That I
answer.
just wanted to know. That I just wanted to know. It appears he
The
has done it
style, the
interestingly with
way
the
of
Moose Last.
writing it's similar.
Beg pardon?
And the way of writing is very similar, yes. And yeah,
Okay.
there's always an element of magic realism in it. Yeah, yeah, of course. Even in Victor City there was.
But
A shame, not so much. I don't remember. It was a long time back. I read it quite a long time back. So
Hmm.
okay, okay,
It does have,
okay.
shame also does have elements of magic
Mhm.
realism, and shame also, does have the same kind of writing style and
Yeah,
his
writing
play
style is
with,
very.
yeah,
Mhm.
play with language, and those things do remain the same. And always there's this touch of history. The
Yeah,
history,
yeah.
yeah,
Him being an historian, yeah.
correct. So that's also always there.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll share my screen again. Okay. So some of the themes which are, explored in Midnight's Children as the history versus the individual. And again, this, though it has been done to some extent in, other books also, in, like, for example, Raja Rav's book, or even Mulk Raj
Okay.
Anand's book also. But still, I think he has been very successful in doing that to a large extent. For example, there are a number of important events which take place throughout the book. Um, we see the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and then you also have the Indian independence movement, Jawaharlal Nehru's speech and the eve of independence. We have a lot of
Forma-
things which, yes,
Formation of Bangladesh.
yeah, formation of Bangladesh, the war, China war, the various wars, and all those things. But there's also, I feel, some amount of, everything is linked to the individual. And sometimes it's also mocked or trivialized in a certain way. For example, there's this passage which comes in Midnight's Children about, one of the worst moments in India's colonial history, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where there's a description of the chilling effect which it has on the individual Adam Aziz, who has lived through it all. So, as the 51 men march down the alleyway, a tickle replaces the itch in my grandfather's nose. The 51 men enter the compound and take up positions, 25 to Dyer's right and 25 to his left. As Brigadier Dyer issues a command, the sneeze hits my grandfather full in the face. Achoo, he sneezes and falls forward, thereby saving his life. Red stuff stains his shirt. There are screams now and sobs, and the strange chattering continues. More and more people seem to have stumbled and fallen on top of my grandfather. So one way, it's a kind of a mock heroism, kind of mock, mocking of the whole incident by he just sneezes and is saved. But at the other end, you also see the whole horror of it, and how, there's this buckle of the bag which gets embedded in him, the scar which remains till the day he dies, kind of thing. So uh, so there's a lot of examples which demonstrate what Salim's belief that he is linked to history in a very literal manner and in a metaphorical manner. And so this was very different from the way either novels were written during this period or history books were written during this period. So um, he treats, in a way, Rushdie treats history as fiction, and thereby he doesn't take it very seriously. And he does not retell history as a fact. So he, in fact, the history he narrates is full of mistakes in dates. In fact, I think it was, there's a place in the novel where he says that he's probably mistaken the year of the death of Mahatma Gandhi. And he says it's fine, it's okay. So this is what I derive from my recollection and my memory. So it's fine. So it seems like as if, he's writing history as Salim's autobiography. So Rushdie would like to show us that the history in Midnight's Children is as much fiction as any other, and that it should not be seen as an objective chronicle of the times that form the backdrop of his novel. So unlike history, which is usually linear and chronological, what he means here in this article is the written history, which is linear and chronological. Rushdie's narration is cyclical, and he obviously shows a desire to so shape his material that the reader will be forced to accept its non-objective nature. The central rule is that the small errors in the text, such as the wrong dates of important events, including the date of Gandhi's assassination, are clues indicating that Salim is capable of consciously distorting facts. So Rushdie has bemoaned the fact that his book is often read as history rather than as fiction. But to read it as pure fiction would be to miss the point too. Salim's absurd story linking the history of a nation with that of an ordinary family chosen at random is meant at one level to expose the absurdity of history and to challenge the confidence and pride of a historian and a historian's attempt to explain to us what really happened in the past. Yet on the other hand, it is meant to capture the most difficult period in independent India's history, namely the period of the emergency. So, again, there's this scene which comes where Salim cuts up seemingly important political newspaper articles at random and he rearranges them to constitute a new view of reality. This is when he tries to send a message to Commander Sabarmati that his wife is unfaithful to him. So the whole thing he tries, that scene is written to show that presenting history as an objective truth, could be sometimes dangerous and untrue too. So the book represents Rushdie's great grief and sorrow at the turn of events in Indian politics that led to the imposition of the emergency at the recommendation of the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, in 1975 to save herself from going to prison. So the emergency lasted from 75 to 77, had spelt the gravest threat to Indian democracy since independence, especially because of the version that Mrs. Gandhi had given to the nation for its imposition. The emergency, she had persuaded the President of India, was necessary to save the country from external threat, while there was actually none. The years of the emergency will therefore remain etched in Indian memory as the darkest period in the history of free India. So, characterized by repressions, the censorship of the press, the imprisonment of the leaders of the opposition, the torture of activists, including artists, dismissals from jobs, forced retirements, and untold brutalities on the people of India. All this sounds very familiar to certain other happenings. So it was a time when the India had become a totalitarian state. No wonder it was a period marked by an overriding feeling of impotence and crippling despair for having lost two very powerful forces. By creating a non-heroic character and a family through which Rushdie gives us the history of India, especially the dark period of the emergency, he is trying to dramatically recreate the close brush with dictatorship and the complete helplessness that almost every average and hence powerless Indian of the times had experienced. The book, which ends with the imposition of emergency, is appropriately despair-ridden because no one at the time knew Mrs. Gandhi would lift the emergency and call for the elections, or that the angry people of India would vote her out and replace her with the opposition. This kind of personalization of history makes the events of the times live in the psyche of the reader, an achievement that is not possible in an ordinary book of history. Salim's life from his birth to his near death like condition is meant to parallel the journey of free India from an optimistic nation to comatose submissive one. Okay. So at the end of the novel, you feel like asking, So what is Rushdie really doing to history in creating a character like Salim? Has any other Indian English writer before Rushdie used history as a theme? So how is Rushdie different? Okay. Like I said, history was used in novels by Indian English writers such as Raja Rao, Kushwant Singh, uh, and others. However, they wrote about Indian independence and the partition. They wrote from a perspective that there is such a thing as a history. So Rushdie tried, on contrast, he tried to suggest that history itself is a lie. So Raja Rao was rewriting the history of the village Kantapura, a counter history, and not just a history as narrated in history books written by British historians. But here, Rushdie wasn't trying to do that, you know. So Rushdie was trying to present history in a way that is seen through the eyes of an individual. So the individual since the 20th century has become a very small and powerless being because governments have become very, very oppressive and powerful. This postmodern insight is clearly seen in Midnight's Children. Salim is the center of attention at the time of his birth. So the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru writes to his parents, newspapers carry his pictures, celebrate his arrival, and they award him for being India's first midnight child. But as he grows older, he begins to lose his position, first in the household and then in the country itself. So much so that at 31, Salim feels completely drained out and impotent, having been forcibly castrated during the emergency. Rushdie's treatment of the theme of the individual and history highlights the tragedy of being an individual in contemporary times. So to sum up, what Rushdie has done is not easy because it is obvious he's writing the novel where the life of the individual is fused with that of the nation. And not as a fictional gimmick, but as an attempt to create an emotional spot in the reader about the most sad and disturbing event in the history of free India. Like I said, there were at least another 20 novels since the publication of Midnight's Children, wherein the life of the individual runs parallel along with the life of the nation. And this new trend highlights the contribution of Rushdie to the Indian novel in English. Okay. So next theme which we want to explore is about the colonialism and neo-colonialism in India. So mostly what has set apart writers from former colonies has been, among other things, a desire to set right the record of their country's history, traditions, and civilizations through their work. And most of them, Rushdie is also one of them. Most of them are known as activist writers because they carry their political challenges to authority into their books and they connect the books with the world outside. Now, so most migrant writers tend to write books which are political acts and constitute true post-colonial works. For example, they want to show what freedom really is, and it's not just political independence. They want to show that merely the physical gesture of handing over of the power to the original natives has not always been enough. So they want to show what post-colonialism actually means. So work of these writers challenge the ideologically determined paradigms of historical relationships and try to free the non-white formerly colonized person from the awe in which he or she holds the colonizer. It is not surprising, therefore, that these novelists has reinvented the English language and the fictional form and tried to rewrite their colonial history in their fiction from the perspective of the colonies. In Midnight's Children also, Rushdie attacks British colonialism and its representatives, which are symbolized in characters like Methwold. And, so he talks about many of the ills in independent India, whatever happens, as he links it to the mischief played by the British during their reign. So moral of his representation is that the foreigner, came to plunder and colonize. So India would have been a beautiful country And this is the typical migrant writer's standpoint, he makes Methwold into a caricature, a symbol of evil and moral degeneration. And he also talks about how his exploitation, and he also shares, how Methwold also has this view, like the other Britishers, that that Britishers were not really so bad. So there's this quote which he says, "You will admit we weren't all bad. Built your roads, schools, railway trains, parliamentary system, all worthwhile things." So he views that they were the ones who civilized the influence on the subcontinent, and etc etc, which all is which are all being mocked by um Rushdie in Midnight's Children. Okay. So we see that whims which he has when he passes on the house to them. He tells you have to keep everything, lock, stock, and barrel. You should not, everything is in tick-tock condition and all that stuff. So colonies were given independence. It is a fact that, those colonies were given independence earlier, where Britain was certain that the new government would remain within its economic and political orbit. It's also a fact that the most lasting and intense warfare, for example, in South Africa, occurred where the freedom struggle was both nationalist as well as revolutionary, and where decolonization would mean confiscation of foreign investments and severance of economic ties with the colonizing country. So the politics of colonialism is well documented today. And all these, there's this famous speech of Tharoor also, where he speaks about how the railway trains and schools and all the systems which were built and made by the British was made to only support them, and was not meant.
Reparation.
Yeah, so it was not meant
He
really for.
he demanded a reparation from them.
Yeah,
in that
yes,
speech.
yes, he demands that. Yeah. So apart from this, yeah. Okay. Now coming to the neo-colonialism aspect of it, so there's this there is a funny scene which happens where Rushdie says how Ahmad Sinai starts to become fairer in complexion day by day. There's that scene which comes, right? So basically, he says that all the large number of Indian businessmen, including Ahmad Sinai, they get up one morning and find that they have turned white. So Rushdie has said in an interview in 1983 that this is an imagery that he had used to show that the Indians were now stepping into British shoes. They had this culture of clubs, drinks, and the cocktail hour as seen in the book and everything. So very much like other migrant Indian English writers, Rushdie also consciously sets out to expose British colonialism and its longer lasting impact called neo-colonialism. So, so has very strong feelings and about India's continued obsession, or maybe not just India, Indian subcontinent's continued obsession with the awe of the Englishman.
Yeah.
True. And he has a lot of symbols and allegory that he uses to highlight this. Yes, Shamal Ravji, you wanted to share something?
Do you see that the neo-colonialism is still present in our country?
To some extent, yes, I think. So there was this very interesting video which my son was showing me. So I'm not sure if you heard of this YouTuber. I think it's Mr. Beast.
Mr. Bean.
Mr. Beast. Have you heard of this YouTuber called Mr. Beast? He's one of the number one top YouTubers and all that. So he was on a visit. Okay. So he was on a visit to India. So he's got this, like, every video crosses millions and millions of views. He's very popular and all that stuff. and all these kids like watching it. So he was on a visit to India, and he's in the North India, I think somewhere in Rajasthan or Bihar or something like that. And I think it was Rajasthan. He's walking on the road, and so suddenly there's this boy who appears and asks him, can I take a photo with you? So Mr. Beast is very happy, So he stands and he takes a photo with the boy and he asks him, so have you been like, you've watched my YouTube videos, is it? Which is your favorite video? And that boy was clueless. So he never took the photo because he was Mr. Beast. He took the photo because he was just a white man
Oh,
who he
foreigner.
found. Yeah.
That is correct. That still we have
So,
that fancy. That
yeah.
fancy we still have. In any tourist spot, if we happen to find 3 or foreigners, we go to their group and let us have a snap. That is there with us still. You are very correct. That is there. Even the other day I found it actually.
Yeah.
In Tamil Nadu, I felt it actually. We have
Oh,
come to
it
visit the
happens in
temple.
Tamil Nadu also, is it?
Yes, yes, really. Because 2 months back we went in a South India tour, there we found. Even
Oh.
our own people said, let us have a snap with them. We don't know who are they, which country, what language and other things. I said, what is the fun of having it? But even then, someone wanted, that is there. Maybe that is what this neo-colonialism still is there.
Yeah, there's still that obsession with the Englishman, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to have a little personal, just I found out, personal
Mhm.
link to this book.
Mhm.
You can remember or recollect, while referring to this surviving 581 midnight children in 1957,
Mhm.
who were all nearing 10th birthday. That means it was already 10 days they had been born actually. And
Mhm.
after some have died and other things, the left out number was 581.
Mhm.
And they were not aware of one another's existence.
Mhm.
And in that book, Salim refers to a town called Baud,
Mhm.
Baud,
Mhm.
and that happens to be on the banks of Mahanadi River in Odisha.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and that twin sisters, he refers to twin sisters there. They
Mhm.
possess the ability of making every man who saw them fall in hopelessly and he
Mhm.
suddenly fall in love with them. That is what Rushdie writes.
Mhm.
And this is in the chapter My 10th Birthday for information.
Mhm.
Book 2, page 267. We may keep just a note of it. Future,
Mhm.
later on, you can refer it.
Mhm.
Why I am saying this is, he has spelled it wrongly. There is a place, Baud, B-A-U-D, but you have
Mhm.
to, spelling is, correct spelling is B-A-U-D-H, Baud. And
B-A-U-D?
H for
H.
Hyderabad.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Huh.
There you can Google it, find out. And this particular place falls in a district, Fulbani, in Odisha.
Mhm.
And that is a place where I started my service as stenographer in 1975.
Oh.
That I wanted to say. Oh, there is a personal reference here. The
Okay.
particular Baud place is 70 kilometers away from the place where I started working.
Oh.
Employment. That is a personal reference I found. And he is
Oh.
correct. There is a
Mhm.
place called Baud. It is actually banks on Mahanadi River and it is a
Mhm.
tribal district. All those things are factually correct. That means he has well researched the book. That's what I
Mhm.
wanted to say.
He has really well researched the book. In fact,
Very.
he speaks about where he grows up. So he talks about Breach Candy. He talks about Warden Road. So when I first entered Bombay, I lived in
Uh,
Breach Candy.
mm,
So for me, the book feels like, especially the location, what he talks about, the
uh,
Breach Candy Hospital, Mahalakshmi Temple,
yes, the temple.
Siddhivinayak Temple, and
Siddhanath. And there
uh,
is another beautiful paragraph actually where he describes Bombay. Because
hmm,
seven islands and other things gives all those ways, how it has happened and how they have got connected one
hmm,
with the
hmm,
other.
hmm.
That I like that because I was not aware of the background of Bombay and other things, metropolis.
Yeah. So much about Bombay, what he talks about is places which are very close to me. Breach Candy was my first introduction to Bombay. And
Okay.
he also talks about that the tetrapods.
Tetra, exactly.
Yeah, the
That man, he has
tetrapods.
got a plan. Actually, he reclaims
Yeah,
to sea land and other things.
correct.
And
Correct.
now he says there is Taj Hotel there in that area.
Yeah, yeah. Taj is there, and so that was the Taj which was attacked during the that we have that
This
Kasab incident. Kasab
terrorist
came,
attack.
yeah,
Terrorist
terrorist
attack.
attack and all. So the tetrapods are still there. I recently read somewhere that they removed it, but I'm not sure if they have actually. So along
Ah,
the seashore, you have those tetrapod structures, huge cement
exactly.
structures which fill the thing. And it's supposed
Ah.
to keep the, I don't know what exactly, it's supposed to control the waves or something like that.
Control the because it can, what I feel is sand, something like that they put in between so water doesn't come. That was an idea that is there in the book also because he wanted to sell that land, become big businessman. That is there
Mm-hmm.
in the book also.
Correct, correct. And
Uh,
most of whatever he writes about and talks about is very true. So Breach Candy, which
ah,
I was my first introduction to Bombay, and that is like one of the most most expensive places of Mumbai. So I was there only because my father-in-law had his government quarters there. So otherwise, it's
acha,
not a
acha.
place which you can rent or buy.
No,
you
it's
know
trusting. In
so it's,
Bombay,
yeah, so it was really like what he
I
speaks
know.
about, it was, in fact, the people who
True.
actually own houses there are actually mostly, they are people who had bought it during that time at very cheap rates.
Exactly. Exactly.
And yeah, so it's a very very vibrant and a very
Very
detailed,
realistic.
yeah, very
Very
very realistic,
realistic. Yes.
very
Though he
realistic.
speaks of magical realism, I don't think there is any line in between these two. It is very much blurred between
Correct.
reality and magic realism. Not much of
Mm,
a difference. For instance,
correct.
the way is to Sundarbans, you remember in the Sundarbans that paragraph, that chapter. I really
Mm,
enjoyed reading it.
mm.
In the Sundarbans, if you ask me, I would like to read that para and this
Sure,
Jamila's.
sure.
These two chapters are really worthy. The
Correct, correct.
blending of fantasy and real is artistic and
Yeah.
very haunting. That is what I found with the Sundarbans. In the
Mm,
Sundarbans, that is the chapter.
correct. I felt he was very knowledgeable about the entire country, which is a very difficult thing to
He,
do.
he's thorough. He
Yeah, he's quite
pinpoint a
thorough.
And
particular
actually
place
went
called
on a,
Bowden. Sir,
Yeah, yeah,
he
Bharatwaj.
got advanced for this novel, and he went on a India tour, I suppose. Only after that
Oh,
he wrote this novel, I think.
okay, that's nice.
that is something I do not know.
He
Probably.
traveled
Oh,
with normal people. He traveled third class or something. He mentions that somewhere.
ah, because otherwise I don't think this is something that could have been
Uh,
written. Because even in
yeah.
Bombay,
And of course, Bombay, he loves Bombay.
he
That's very
loved
obvious.
Bombay.
He
Yeah,
makes it a
it's
point to say that it's not Mumbai Devi that Mumbai is named after.
yeah.
Even now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He loved Bombay, and but even then, the number of years he was in Bombay doesn't seem so much, right?
Yeah.
He's born in 47 and he left in 64, I guess.
Uh, not too sure,
And
but yeah.
something like that. Yeah. So I don't know, I felt like he hadn't been there that much for writing so well about the city, in fact. So, like, he speaks about not just here, he speaks about Kolaba, he speaks about RA Colony, he speaks
Mhm.
about, like, those are like people. Mumbai itself is huge. And I feel I have so much knowledge about Mumbai only because I shifted house like some 5, 6 times there. And each
Okay.
time I was in different corners of Bombay. So that's how I feel I know at least this much. But for many others may not have this much of a knowledge about the place
Mhm.
itself, I felt. And then he talks about Meenakshi temple in Madurai.
Ah,
Yeah. So it's like really vast. He talks about Vaijayanti Mala in one of the paragraphs. Like, wow.
Of course,
He,
he loves Bollywood.
yeah,
he's thorough. He's thorough.
he's thorough. He's
And if you
thorough.
remember, madam, we discussed some time back regarding the perfume novel by Patrick Susskind. Remember?
Which one?
Perfume.
Ah, correct.
Perfume. Patrick Susskind. There
Ah.
only the olfactory function with reference to real flavor, real perfume.
Correct.
But in
Correct.
this book, Rushdie took it little beyond. Even he has given flavors to, perfumes to feelings, emotions.
Feelings. Correct.
That is really, I thought, really a step ahead of the pattern for skin. That's what I felt.
True. Yeah. Okay. So one more part of the theme was about fragmentation, migrancy, and memory. I don't know what happened in my PowerPoint. R and Y are missing. Yeah, and memory. So in the 20th century, there was a lot of migration from, the non-whites into the white countries, and this kept continuing even in the 21st century. And apart from, the others in other careers and IT and jobs and all, there was a lot of migration of third world writers also into the metropolitan capitals of London, Paris, New York, to find, publishers and markets that would support them. And there was also a lot of interest in such kind of books among the people too. People like Raja Rao and Rushdie, in fact, went to study in Western universities, and they stayed on for this, mainly for this reason. And there is every migrant who stays away from the mother country begins to experience an acute sense of homelessness and anxiety after the initial pleasures of being in the new land begin to fade away. And it's a normal pattern of behavior because the migrant suddenly begins to miss the familiar frame of references and relationships back home. And so these, experiences are often compounded by rejection in the host countries, usually white countries, on the basis of color and race. And race riots keep erupting every now and then, even now, because members of the host countries feel threatened that they will be overrun and overtaken by the former slaves in their own country. So most migrants, including writers, try to cope with this sense of homelessness and rejection and their own inability to return by over-idealization of the home or by the use of satire. So they tend to either praise their mother country in superlatives, or they satirize it and poke fun at its flaws to justify why they can't return. Now, Rushdie belongs to the category of the typical migrants, though he generally tries to, oppose this. In fact, he says he in fact attacked even Raja Rao's writing as being a very nativist view of India. So he, he has actually made Bombay or Kashmir as the location of virtually all of his novels. And he has chosen the method of satire to write about the political history of India and about colonialism, and both of which are already there as a part of Midnight's Children too. So fragmentation, migrancy, and memory is a central theme of not just Midnight's Children, the author of this article feels, but also of all of his novels in some way or the other. And Rushdie is aware of this centrality in his life, and he has written extensively on this subject. For example, he writes, there's this article of his called Reclaiming a City and a History, where he says it is natural for a migrant writer to throw a backward nostalgic glance at his mother country and to imagine that he will be able to recover the country of his past fully. He can never do it. Because of his physical alienation from that country, the migrant writer can only create fictions, not actual cities or villages, but invisible ones, imaginary homelands, Indias of the mind. This means that when a migrant writer tries to unlock the gates of the past, as he has tried to do in Midnight's Children, Rushdie found himself writing a novel of memory and about memory, which is why perhaps he made Salim into an unreliable narrator. Salim makes mistakes of memory, and his vision, which is affected by his personality and circumstances, is fragmentary. In other words, What Rushdie was saying was that no matter how hard an Indian writer tries to write about India authentically, he can't because he lives outside. And he is dealing with a reality whose fragments have been irretrievably lost. However, on the positive side, he feels it is exciting for the migrant writer as she tries to reconstruct the past from the broken pots of antiquity, because it is very much like what archaeologists try to do. That is an act of imagination and creativity. As an expatriate, Rushdie's concern is with damaged reality and the reconstruction of a whole reality which has been lost. Salim laments the loss of his clairvoyant powers and the loss of his security in childhood as the child of his parents. He laments the disintegration of his family in India and Pakistan after partition and everything which can sanely be called real. Salim grows up viewing reality through a perforated sheet, one bit at a time, and the piecing together of a suppressed reality is his mission. Denied information, Salim resigns himself to an alternative method, cognition, or knowing through memory's truth. Well, then, I must content myself with shreds and scraps, as I wrote centuries ago. The trick is to fill in the gaps guided by the few clues one is given, by the other remaining shards of the past lingering in my ransacked memory vaults. Yes. So, Salim says he narrates his story because he fears absurdity. I admit it above all things. I fear absurdity. He fears the meaninglessness of not belonging to family or country, and that is terrifying. Like an angst-ridden modern writer, Salim Rushdie tries to impose order and meaning on a meaningless existence through his writing. Memory helps him put together fragments from the past that migrancy had taken away from him. Yes, so that's all I have for the last theme.
A very well researched presentation. You
Yeah.
must have taken a lot of pain because just not alone novel to be about the writer, about the context, about politics.
Hmm.
There are several things.
I wish I had done more, I feel. It was very, I
So
feel I had, till there was so much more to do, which I couldn't.
that's what I was just going to say. See, even after having sat for 1.5 hours, I still feel actually this particular book requires another session to understand its depth.
Correct.
Because he has pumped in so much in those 600 and odd pages. At one
Hmm.
sitting or at one read, I don't feel we can get everything into our hands.
True,
There
true.
are several loose ends I was having in my mind. Particularly
Hmm.
that snake charmer, what is that, the picture thing? We don't know
Hmm.
where it went.
Yeah.
He's
Hmm.
it's a loose ended. I don't know. I didn't get him actually. After he fights and
I
wins.
was going to come to it in the next slide, actually. So that is one
Ah,
of the parts of his, his structure, where there are many stories,
ah,
where there are beginnings without any endings.
exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I said. Why did he leave things like that, Rashi? He didn't
Hmm.
tie up all loose ends and say this is over. No, he has
Correct.
left few things for our
Yeah.
imagination or for our understanding or for our analysis. I do not, but he has left them. He didn't say point A, point B, that type of thing is not there. Maybe life is like that. There are certain loose ends, certain
Or maybe it's
inconclusive bits.
because he's trying to just show through Salim's eye, and Salim's in his eye, maybe
Possible,
that
possible,
character or that story has gone, so
possible,
it's gone.
possible, possible. Maybe he is trying to champion a sense of ambiguity. Life is
Yeah.
like that. Everything is
Hmm.
not what I call black and white. So that could
Hmm.
be a reason. So
Correct.
and there was another momentous occasion when actually Salim goes and meets that Mary, the
Hmm.
pickle manufacturer head.
Hmm.
That was wonderful actually. At the end, he
Yeah.
goes,
Yeah.
he said to Sardar. There are several, if you have to go in, as you said earlier, it is not a story, it is a garland of stories.
Hmm.
Many stories
True.
in one story. That is what I found. Many.
Mm. True, true, very true. So that's so when it comes to the structure of the novel, Midnight's Children, it is not easy to pinpoint as, one particular thing. So where that it's complicated because there are stories within the stories.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it's also metafiction. So it's metafiction where it's a form of fiction in which the process of writing fiction itself is the theme, right? So um basically metafiction is used as a theme whenever as a structure whenever you want to investigate the relationship between art and life. Here we can say a relationship between art, life, and history, maybe. So Salman Rushdie weds the two separate genres by filtering ancient narrative structures through the postmodern. So you have also get an idea like of those Arabian Nights or epic story structures. Also, you have a glimpse of that kind of a story structure too, the ancient narrative structures. But at the same time, there's the postmodern structure also. So there's always this question, where does Rushdie belong? Either is it to the post-colonial fiction world or is it to the postmodern? And he has conveniently planted one foot in each tradition. Some allege that he exoticizes India for the West's conception. Others have been more charitable in including him among Indian writers while decrying his appropriation by postmodernism. And Rushdie is happy to play along with postmodern theorists, which also adds to the problem. So there was an undue, emphasis on realism and before Rushdie, especially with Indian fiction. And that was something, Indian fiction in English, I should say. And that was something which was broken by Rushdie, and he showed that art can never be very lifelike. And metafiction bears the tricks used by writers to show that how novels are made of, and his own telling of how it feels a very it gives a very meta feel the way the book is written, and sometimes you feel whether there's a Rushdie was also born in 1947, though not in August. He was born, I think, in June or June or July something. So somewhere it feels like Rushdie is trying to put himself into the shoes of the character and write about it. I'm not sure whether so one of his wife was Padma, right?
Yes.
Bharatwaj.
Yes, I remember. Padma.
Yeah.
Padma Lakshmi. Yeah.
Padma Lakshmi in real life too. So I'm not sure if she is the person behind the character whom he talks about as Padma, because he married 5 times. 4 times there was a divorce, and I think so I'm not sure who was the wife when he wrote Midnight's Children, but it's very it's very strange and a very meta feeling with the whole book.
No, in
Um,
this genre, it's mostly metafiction. Even 100 Years of Solitude.
yeah,
Finally you realize the book he's reading is the story that we've been reading. And
correct,
even in Tin Drum, it's Oscar starts writing his own story. Right?
correct. Yeah, maybe that's not sure if magic realism and metafiction. Yeah, maybe something it's there with both.
Mhm.
So some of the factors in his structure was, like, as I mentioned, you get a glimpse of Arabian Nights kind of a feeling in the way he says stories after stories, stories within stories. And there's a lot of digressions without any explanation. So he would just digress somewhere, begin something, not end it, and just leave it there. And I also found it very interesting how he summarized things. So he just goes on and on and on about a story, and then suddenly, before some particular event, he would just summarize all that he spoke about before and all the various happenings, and then present the thing. So, and also, Salim is an unreliable narrator, and there's the fantasy and realism elements, which kind of makes this structure a very difficult one to compartmentalize in any specific way. Um, okay, so I have some quotes here, but I also have some more quotes in the which I have marked at other places. So let me first
This is
start
one of the
with this.
best. I wanted to tell you this. Yeah. You can
Yeah,
never understand me without understanding the past and something like that, right?
correct, correct. So I'm the sum total of everything that went before me, of all I have been, seen, done, of everything done to me. I am everyone, everything whose being in the world was affected by mine. I am anything that happens after I'm gone, which would not have happened if I had not come. Uh, very, I don't know, it felt very interesting. And it also felt like that scientific principle where, butterflies flutter of wings actually. Yeah, what is that?
Ripple effect.
I don't know.
Ripple
Ripple
effect.
effect. Yeah, ripple effect of one thing adding on to everything else. And how one small change can change everything else too. So
That's
memory is truth.
part of universal consciousness and
Correct. Yeah. So memory is truth because memory has its own special kind. It selects, eliminates, alters, exaggerates, minimizes, glorifies, and vilifies also. But in the end, it creates its own reality. It's heterogeneous, but usually coherent version of events. And no sane human being ever trusts someone else's version more than his own. Yeah. What's real and what's true aren't necessarily the same. I felt this very, very, very interesting way of looking at it. Children are the vessels into which adults pour their poison. What can't be cured must be endured. Yeah. I think I didn't write any more, but I have a few more which I had wanted to share. So, yeah. So there was this one which I had. Let me stop share and I'll share the quotes. Yes, this is one which I had noted and kept. So, what is truth? What is sanity? Did Jesus rise up from the grave? Do Hindus not accept that the world is a kind of dream, that Brahma dreamed is dreaming the universe, that we only see dimly through that dream web, which is Maya? Maya may be defined as all that is illusory, as trickery, artifice, and deceit. Apparitions, phantasms, mirages, sleight of hand, the seeming form of things, all these are parts of Maya. If I say that certain things took place which you, lost in Brahma's dream, find hard to believe, then which of us is right? Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting way of looking at it. Yeah.
There are two quotes on reality. I found out from books. I would like to put it in chart. It will be convenient.
Huh.
Chart.
Yeah. You've shared it here. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Reality is a question of perspective. The further you get from the past, the more concrete and plausible it seems. But as you approach the present, it inevitably seems more and more incredible. Yeah.
It says reality is a question of perspective. You can stop and analyze the particular event. Or
True.
this is something that is real to me may not necessarily be real to the other man because it says in the perspective. My perspective naturally will differ from the other's perspective. In other words, my interpretation of reality differs from one from the other.
Correct,
So that
true.
is one.
And like what you say when someone from the, like, for example, let's say it's a ghost story which is shared by your grandfather or something which happened very
Ha,
much in the
ha, ha, ha.
past, you feel it more believable. But if someone comes and tells you today that I saw this ghost, you're not going to believe the person, and what
Exactly.
rubbish.
That is
I think that's very interesting. Yeah.
So one more.
Yeah, the moment of one's greatest strength also contains the seeds of one's final downfall. Correct. I also
And
had
one
a
last quote. I will close with this. So I have
sure.
found out some because not just whenever Kagura has bigger, I don't know, found them.
Okay.
Let us see if I can do it.
There were actually so many more, in fact, Shamil
There
Raj.
are so many. You are very
Yeah,
correct. Every
yeah,
2, 3 pages, you find something actually really good.
yeah,
That is what
yeah.
I found. I wrote it them separately, and in the margin, I have said Q. Q means it is a quotation. What of quoting like that
Uh,
in my notes when I read it.
There were so many, you know.
Ah,
This one was very interesting. I learned the first lesson of my life. Nobody can face the world with his eyes open all the time.
exactly. Good.
I thought it was so beautiful and
Beautiful.
so well
Definitely.
put. Yeah.
And another one.
Yeah. Love my child is a thing that every mother learns. It's not born with a baby, but made. So
Made.
true. Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. There's this, I also remember there's one more quote which is very similar to this, which I read
Acha,
somewhere
acha.
else, not in Midnight's Children, somewhere else, about how you love a child, not when you
Oh.
give birth to it, but when you bring it up, actually.
Mm, mm,
You
mm.
know, yeah. And so, yeah, that was very true with this story also, right? So you, I think there are a lot of powerful
So many.
quotes in
I
the book.
even
Yeah.
random reading. I found out some 15 quotes. I put it some 3, 4, and they are
Yeah.
of course not repeated. There is something else.
Yeah.
They are not repeated.
I actually had a feeling so many of them are things which
Uh,
I've heard, like my father tell or my grandmother say, someone, in the family
so
tell
he
or friends talk
exactly.
about, yeah, in Indian context. So there's this
Mm.
one where he says, "What you wear is forever who you are."
Exactly. That is also there.
Uh,
Found out. What you
Correct,
were is forever who you
who
are.
you are. And
Mm.
this is something which I've like heard so many times from so many people in my family. So I was thinking, wow.
How natural, how true.
Yeah. Mm,
And the another quote, there is
mm,
nothing like a war for the
mm.
reinvention of life.
Correct, correct. Mm.
There is
And
nothing like a war.
yeah,
Ah,
and
please,
the
please.
way how he calls optimism itself as a disease.
That is another thing.
Yeah,
It's paradoxical, that expression I found.
yeah.
Optimism, we find it positive. He says good, healthy, and other thing. He says it is a disease. And he
Mm,
disease passes one generation to the other. That also he says.
mm.
It's a book actually definitely merits a reread or several rereads. That's what.
Correct, correct, correct.
Anyway, it's very good, I think.
Yeah, there's still so much, so many quotes, so
There's a lot
many.
of things in it actually. We have not been
Mm,
able to plumb everything and no.
true,
That's what
true.
my
And I
final
didn't
feeling is.
realize after you mentioned, I realized we are nearly going to near 2 hours now.
Uh, See, we could not know. Normally, we used to close 1 or 15 minutes, like that
Yeah,
1.5 hours
1 hour.
max.
Yeah,
Max.
correct,
But
correct.
2 hours.
So.
So this book. So now you propose the second book.
Yes, yes, we have. I actually, have some major changes happening in life at this in
Okay,
this
okay.
coming month. So I
Yeah, I
wanted to,
found
in fact,
congratulations. Congratulations, son joined the university. You
yeah,
have given
son
a
joined
message.
university. In fact, I am also, maybe I should, let me stop the recording and then I'll share
Uh,
with you.
that is better. That is better.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.